Hello and welcome to the Replimat, a jaunt through the episodes of Deep Space Nine, week by week, with a brand new viewer, me, Tim, and a seasoned fan,
Me,
Andy.
Andy. Hello.
And this week is episode 14, or season 1, episode 14, Progress. Story and screenplay by Peter Allen Fields, directed by Les Landau. And it was
Okay.
really good.
I was going to say, what did you think of it?
Really good.
Because
Next
again,
one, please.
obviously, I've seen it. You, not so much.
No, first time today, first time this afternoon, just before this, in fact, and yeah, it was after the slight frustration of last week. This was
Yes.
really good, and I was wondering at first if I was enjoying it more because of last week, and I don't think I was. I don't think it really had anything to do with that. I just think it was overall just a much stronger episode. As I mentioned to you while we were watching, there were certainly the characters, or the character of I can't remember his name now. I didn't write it down.
Mullibok.
I knew it was Molly something. Like him and his companions, they were believable, relatable, understandable characters that the audience could engage with. They weren't people that you had to stretch your imagination to understand or relate to in any way.
Well, yeah,
There was
because
nothing mystical or there wasn't anything too sci-fi about the whole thing.
last week, of course, one of the issues we had was A, the setting, and B, the characters, as in the Bajoran characters in particular. That obviously, as you just said, we just wasn't buying it. It's just like, this doesn't sound like a Bajoran story. You know, they didn't link and connect in with the Bajor that you certainly are becoming to know, be familiar with.
Yes, very much.
And I think we did say, if this had been on something like Bajor Moon, then we could argue that might work because it's slightly disconnected from the main planet.
Yes.
Irony of ironies, here we are next week, and it is on the Bajoran Moon, and they're way more Bajoran than I think we've possibly seen outside of the officials. Yeah. So what did you think? Well, let's before we get to the real meat of the story, which of course is the Kira Mullibok stuff. What did you think of? Let's talk about the B story, which the No J Consortium. This is the one I always remember when I think of these two characters, because this is where they really start to shine. And you realise, there's potential here.
That was charming. I think charming is probably the best word I can come up with for that. It was, again, there wasn't any sense of sort of unease about the characters. They weren't. They were shown in situations that they were, Nog and Jake were able to. They were in control of the situation. They were responding and just the whole thing. It was a nice sort of joyous subplot. Just muddling along in the background. The only thing I did wonder when they got sold the piece of land.
Yeah.
I did wonder if that was going to be on the moon that was about to be destroyed.
That didn't occur to me, but actually that would have made thematic sense in terms of the story, wouldn't it? If it turns out they ended up with this piece of the land, and then that could have been easily the next beat where, Quark gets involved at the end. He's like, right, let's buy this land off you, let's make some money. They make the latinum only for the person who just to buy it off them. Of course, it turns out it's actually because of what they're doing on this moon, and this other dude suddenly reeks in the rewards, and they'd be like, if we just kept on to it just a little bit longer. That would actually have made perfect last beat of that, just to bring those two plots really bam. Yeah, that didn't occur to me. That's a good call. Interesting. Obviously didn't occur to the writer either, but a bit late now.
Yeah, and it was only after the episode when you said that wasn't the first part of a two-parter.
Unfortunately, not.
The ending was quite sad. I suppose there would have been a to be continued or something on the screen anyway. But because the ending was quite sudden, and I know it is still an ending. You know, it's an ending to that particular part of the main story. But I did wonder if it had been a two-parter, that maybe that's something that they could have gone down with the No-J consortium.
That would have.
I'm done.
But I think what works about this particular thread of these two characters is, for me, it feels natural, which I think is what you're getting at. It's a natural fit for them. They're not. I mean, they're still obviously very young, and they're obviously inexperienced in all kinds of things because they're still kids essentially. But up until this point, we've only seen them really being kids, doing silly kid stuff, hanging around bored, practical jokes, you know, the usual nonsense. Whereas this one, the script really brings out the best of Nog, the Ferengi of Nog, and the very human Jake, where he's still like, obviously I'm aware of stuff because my dad's a Starfleet officer, so on and so on, and those strengths really come to the fore. And it's a good B plot, you know. Yes, it could have linked in, I think, as you pointed out, but as a B plot, it's fun. It's a nice counterbalance to the much more serious stuff going on with Kira. And I think that's sometimes what you need, a nice, not two plots that are like intense, but one's quite serious and touching in a very personal way, and you've got the other one which is very light but touching in a very different kind of way. As you say, charming. There's a lot to commend this episode. I would actually personally say this is probably the best episode of the season so far.
There's certainly been a number that I have really enjoyed. Some of them because we had a couple of months off for life.
Life got in the way,
some of the earlier ones potentially have not so fresh in my mind anymore. But there was something about this episode. I don't quite know what it was. But a couple of minutes in, and I was very comfortable with it. I was just very happy just watching it, and I don't know whether it was necessarily the performances, whether it was the writing, whether it was the directing or what. I found myself in a very comfortable position, just watching the episode and just enjoying it, and just and not finding that I was having to think too much about it. I was just able to appreciate it, rather than, because the other issue is that you tend to, if you're having to think about stuff, then you're judging it, I think, as you go along. Whereas this,
getting critical and stuff.
I was happy just to let it play out, and that's I think that's also why the ending quite surprised me. It surprised me in as much as it surprised me because it was so abrupt. I think the ending is what I expected it to be all along.
I think it's in a way it could go really, couldn't it? Yeah.
Either that, or he would have died somehow on the moon. I certainly wouldn't have expected Kira or anyone to have shot him.
No.
That would be that. I think the psychological damage from that would have been considerable.
I think, although I agree, it is an abrupt ending, but I think it's pitched really. I hate to say the phrase, but I think it's pitched perfectly. It was the right beat to end on, because I don't think anything after that would just be an epilogue. You know, and it's after the story's done, as you said when we finished it, you're like, oh, I want to know what's going to happen next, which of course is the whole point. By the end of it, you're left thinking, where would this have gone next? Because obviously there's more, because obviously they beam up, so clearly there's more with Malibok that we don't see. But I think if we had seen, I don't know, I think it might have diluted the ending. It would have been a bit too pat, maybe, whereas this, it's ambiguous enough that you're left wondering where it could have gone. Yes. You know, is Malibok actually going to forgive her? Are they going to find some ground between them again? I personally, as I said, unfortunately, the character doesn't return. The actor's dead now. I don't know if he died during like the life of DS9 itself.
Yeah.
I know he's dead now.
Yes, he was an old. He was very much an older
Yeah,
actor, wasn't he? He wasn't the
um,
younger one made up.
for sure. I think off screen, as it were, I get a sense that he would have ended. I don't know. I kind of like to think that he would have ended up on Bajor. He would have. I don't know. Would he have started again? That's the problem. I think he's too set in his ways to start again. So I don't know.
Mm.
I'd like to think he found some place, and Kira actually found him a decent piece of land. Used to influence herself. But
He got
then,
his friends back.
yeah, because of course
Whichever
they were already in
way.
Bajor, so that would. And he maybe she would have introduced him to another farming community that he could become part of, so he doesn't have to start from the ground up, literally. But he could find a new place that worked for him.
Mm.
I'd hope it'd be some sort of happy resolution, but then for it to follow through narratively and thematically, I think it would have to be a sad ending for Kira and Monobuck in relation to each other, for it not to cheat the episode, I think.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the end of the episode, but let's talk about the actual story of this episode instead of talking about we talk about how it all ended. What about the actual, as it were, journey for it to get to that point? How did that land for you? What stood out?
It was just great to see Nana Visitor being given decent amount of screen time, decent material to work with. Again, because I commented a few times recently how we've not seen enough of Kira
No.
in some of these episodes. So that was good, and you still get the references from Cisco to the sort of the sense of the sort of respect there, but also the friction between them. The kind of the journey that Kira went on was great, and it didn't have to be signposted for the audience the whole way through. You just
go with
everything
it,
happens
don't you?
organically. Just things progress, and she was obviously taken in by Monobuck, because that sounds like it was duplicitous, but
I think she sympathised with it.
yeah. She sympathised with him and his situation and his background, and I felt as an audience member, I did as well. So I was going on that journey with Kira.
That's interesting you say that, because I was just before we started, I didn't read a whole article, but I just read a little bit, the beginning anyway, of the compendium thingy book that I keep on referring to. And at the beginning of it, Pete Adderfield, the author, said that apparently he didn't like the casting of Mullibok.
Okay.
Because apparently he wanted, the way he wrote it in his head, he imagined Mullibok being a lot harsher. But this guy had quite soft, I say soft, but he's also kind of the old curmudgeon, but with a soft heart, really. And he was teasing her more than actually challenging her. Even when he's trying to get her angry, it's more of in a teasing way as opposed to a proper trying to really piss her off way, where apparently Pierre Fields wanted much more of he's really trying to piss her off and get her rid of her. But though he's warming to her, like apparently the last shot, he wanted it to come across when he basically shrugs her off just before she to beam up. He wanted the writer wanted it to come across a lot more like a real dismissive, like you're dead to me now moment, as opposed. But it's ambiguous enough that I think you could read that depending on which way you watch the show, because obviously the best episodes, best films, best stories, best characters are those that the audience or the reader can invest in and pull from in their own perspective. And I think there's enough in their performances here, enough nuances, you say, that I think you could go either way depending on how your bias towards it, because obviously it's all about your own bias and what you take in. But so I can see why the writer obviously wished it was a bit more harder performance. But, and you may agree, I think actually the casting was right.
Yeah,
I think, because I think there's much more nuance there. Yeah, there's a softer edge, but there was definitely moments where I believe it could easily gone down the darker route between them.
Yeah, if you get someone who's very kind of aggressive or offensive in that respect, what you often get is you get less of a sense that they are happy in themselves doing what they do, living the life that they live. What we had here was a guy who was clearly something of an old curmudgeon, but also a practiced storyteller, and someone who looked and felt at home within that environment, and you bought into immediately the fact that he'd been farming there for 40 years or whatever, and a lot of that was sold simply by the actor's voice. Physically they looked at home there, but the voice does a lot. But the voice sells the character immediately. In the same way, I'm just sort of thinking of a comparison, and there's the old Menoptera in the Doctor Who story, The Web Planet, who tells the story of the the Animus, yes, and
the Exodus from
the sort of cathedral thing that they're in. I can't remember the actor's name now.
Is it Martin Jarvis you're on about here?
He's an old Shakespearean actor. And Martin Jarvis plays Hilio. He's the sort of the young firebrand.
Yeah, of course he's only young at the time. Yeah,
an older guy, and his voice, it just carries you along with it, the sort of storytelling quality, and that's what this guy reminded me of in a similar way, playing Molybok. Just that ability to sell the situation and the character immediately, just simply through his voice. It was great.
I'd agree. As I said, because I alluded to this last week, or actually made it very abundantly clear that I think this is a great episode.
I think you made it abundantly clear last week.
I made it abundantly clear because it's Nana, and frankly, whenever she's had an episode, I'm sure there's got to be at least one where I'm like, doesn't work, but just her performance, like you said about the guy Molybok, I think the actor, might as well let's get his name because.
Yes, I just thought I didn't record.
Hang on 1 second. I shall consult my.
It doesn't say who plays who, does it? Is it? They say who the regular cast is.
Oh, they never tell you. But it's okay. I've got my DS9 companion book. Molybok was played by Brian Keith.
Brian Keith.
Brian Keith. Nice name. Yeah, I think. Like I said, I think his performance was superb. Layered, or everything you say it was, great voice, and his physicality was, superb. But again, I'm always going to go back to Nana because, as I may have possibly mentioned, I think she's particularly superb, and this just shows it because we've seen, as you said, obviously. I can't try to think when the last episode where Kira was central to it. It's been a while. She's been featured heavily in most of them because more so than Cisco, and we'll get to that in a second. But this is certainly the first in a while where she's been the central figure, and she's Nana is given the chance to really shine and show you what she can really do. But what's really nice about this one is up to now we've always seen, I suppose you could say, the gruffer side of Kira. We've seen the more professional side of Kira, the freedom fighter who's not quite got over the whole occupation yet. She's still got issues to deal with. We've seen a lot of that. We've seen, as you say, the growing respect between her and Cisco. We've seen the friction still there. We've seen her develop as a character in relation to all the supporting cast. Like obviously with Voda, we've seen her develop with Voda, we've seen her develop with Quark, we've seen her friendship slowly develop with Dax.
Yeah, there was a
We've seen her
nice moment at the beginning where they were talking about.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah.
I forgot about the whole Morn thing, yeah.
Yeah, that
And
was
is
just a nice little.
finding it quite cute, and Kira's like, "Who the fuck are you?" But that's nice because you'll see so much more of this. Where, again, as they get the writers and get the really real grasp with Dax, because as the actors have gone on record saying many times, is in the first season, the actors are trying to find their voice, because the writers know what the characters are in their head, but the actors are still trying to find their voice as a character. And then, of course, by the end of season 1, for instance, I guess the writers and the production staff have got a chance to actually see it now because they've watched like earlier episodes or whatever. So from season 2, they can start to really play to the actors' strengths, which, of course, they're still finding that. I say they're still finding it. I would say this is possibly the first episode that I've watched in this run where I can see this is where they, not just the actors, but the makers of the show, have found their feet. I mean, obviously there's still more to develop yet, but this, as you said, it's the first episode where straight away you feel comfortable watching it because you're like, it's found its identity. I think, because that's what we've mentioned a few times. Candace been told in other Star Trek, and obviously, I think any story can be told in any Star Trek with enough tweaks. But I think this one is quite unique to DS9 because, again, you could tweak stuff to make Kira's role and this Mullibuck role work with almost any character, I suppose. But this one's quite intrinsic to who Kira is.
Yeah, you lose that. You lose that personal. The sense of it being having a personal importance.
Yeah. Because
if you'd had to spend the first 5 minutes
setting up a new thing,
a voiceover from Patrick Stewart, setting it up as a next gen.
Well, yeah, because you'd also have to have the whole setup of the new planet, set up the politics, whatever, the geopolitical issues, whatever's going on, and then you set up a whole new race of people. And then you'd have to find a connection between whoever the character is they send down with this person. Whereas here, intrinsically, this is who Kira is.
Yeah. It just flows in naturally.
Yeah, because Kira's, we know about Kira's history with her planet and the Cardassians and her issues with the current political state of Bajor. But we know that she's very much I want to say an everyman of Bajor. Really, she was fighting for the people. She considers herself, even though she's like a liaison now, she still considers herself one of the people who survived the Cardassians. And even though we know that, I don't think we've really seen it conveyed in a way we do this episode. Because we start seeing a softer side of her as she starts to relate with a normal Bajoran.
Yes.
Because like I've said during the episode, it's the first time we've seen her, because up to now we've only really seen her deal with the officials, the new provisional government and Starfleet and aliens going through the wormhole and trying diplomacy, which is obviously not her bag. Whereas this time it's perfectly natural what she's doing. But even then, she's still got that friction. She's still got a struggle because she's got a job to do.
She has,
and she's become compromised.
And there's that there's the subtle changes as well that come with her taking off her uniform.
Oh yeah.
So it's it's very much a different Kira who is there without her uniform.
Yeah, you get to see. Yeah, on. She's literally dropped the job and said, right,
like,
this is me, the person. This is, I suppose, this is who she is at her core. Now she's allowed to be, because she doesn't have to fight to be this person. Yeah. She's done the fighting, both officially and as a terrorist freedom fighter. now she can actually just be the person that she's always wanted to be. And because as she said, I think she developed. I think in this episode, maybe I don't. Maybe it's already there, but I think she develops this, as it, she's an old phrase, a love of the land. She suddenly realizes it's the grassroots that matter even more through seeing how Morbok, because he built the land up himself.
Yeah.
I think this episode, knowing what I know going forward, I don't know if deliberately, well, I guess it would be deliberate in a plan on some level, but this definitely sees a change in her. I don't think we'll see more of it again just yet. It's a few episodes yet, but they don't. But the writers and Nana, I guess, they must have felt something making this that they thought, "Ooh, we can really get more of this." Because I think they do that certainly in the penultimate episode this season. It's not a sequel in any sense of the word, but it's certainly a thematic progression of this story, I think, for her as a character. So I think this is definitely a keystone moment, really. It's a milestone, rather. It's a shift in the narrative. And like you said, I felt real and normal. It didn't feel like it was forced or, manufactured to be that way. It just seemed to come naturally.
Yeah, it did. It did for everyone. I mean, Nana has shown in other episodes that she emotes very well as a performer, and that's so. Again, this episode played to her strengths.
Well,
as an actor,
I was watching this context-wise because I've mentioned this to you earlier. Watching an interview on the Shuttlepod show, which it's linked on our Twitter page for anybody who wants to have a check out. It's a good almost 2 hours, but absolutely worth the watch. She does say that in the first season, certainly in the earlier episodes, she was often getting feedback from people about the way she's playing Kira and the way Kira's written, and they're like, "Oh, it's not a very natural woman way to write a character or to act the character and this and that." And she says very abruptly to these people, she says, "Yes, it is, because the performance I was given, obviously I didn't write the character, but the performance I was given, or given rather, is very much how I am as a woman." This is what Nana was saying, that the physicality, the way she delivers the lines, she goes, "That's 100% the way I am, as a person." So yes, this is very much a realistic portrayal of a female character, because it's very, very close to who I am as a person in many ways. So
I don't understand those kind of criticisms though, because if she's playing the Bajoran as well, so what surely that kind of comment is, I don't think you're playing a very good human female, or your performance doesn't subscribe to my view of what a good human female is.
And inevitably it's a man who's saying it as well.
Exactly. I'm always very, very cautious of that kind of feedback is.
Well, another little interesting,
Dodgy.
since we're on the sexism inherently in such comments, which again Nana mentions in this in a Shuttlepod episode. She says, and I think I knew this, but it's one of these things that but you don't really register that you know, where she says that this is possibly, certainly at that point, is the only Star Trek show without any female writers, which is interesting. Because when she said, I was like, well, certainly the original series did. I know that. Well, no, tell her lie. There's one episode, which was the Dax episode, called Dax, which was Dorothy Fontana, where she got pulled over from the original series.
Right. Okay.
And that's literally the only episode she wrote. And it's possible that this series also doesn't have any female directors as well, which is interesting. And yet, the writing is so high that I can only assume that all the male writers were savvy enough to see what Nana was doing and what Terry Farrell was doing and all the other female actors who come along, even Rosalind Chow who plays Keiko. They were savvy enough to see what these people were doing, that they were able to write realistic female characters. Or maybe it is entirely the performance that's doing it. You know, maybe it literally is, you can write any dialogue for anybody and it depends on how you perform it that makes it the perceived idea of male, female, or whatever. Possibly. You could argue, I suppose, it's similar to the old, what Terence Dix always says about the Doctor, is that any piece of dialogue you write for the Doctor can go to any Doctor, but it becomes a nuance to that particular Doctor when the actor performs it. The dialogue can all still be the same. It's all, and I think that actually bears out because you must have seen where it's this convention thing that's been going around for quite a while now. Matt Smith's big speech on Stonehenge in the finale to season 5, 6, whatever.
Yeah, 5.
And of course, the convention thing now is whenever the doctor's at, whichever doctor's at a convention, somebody in the audience gets them to read this big thing in their own way. And of course, I've watched Sylvester's version of it, and it's very Sylvester, very Seventh Doctor, obviously. And yet nothing's changed in the dialogue. So maybe there's some truth that it's not so much how the characters are written, on screen at least, because books are different. I think it depends on how well the actors or actresses play the parts that define them in any particular gender role if you feel you need to. I don't know. But yeah, it's an odd thing that people have this perception. And we're on a complete tangent here, aren't we? It's Nana's fault. It was such a great interview. I'm going to watch some of the other DS9 interviews they do. But I'm trying to... The ones I'll be sharing are the characters that you would have met. So if you do watch it, it's not going to spoil it for you or anybody who's watching us here who haven't seen DS9 yet and watching it with us. I'll be obviously watching them first to make sure they don't reveal anything huge.
That would be a shame.
It would be a shame. I mean, as I say, Nana mentioned stuff from later in the series, but nothing huge that would make you think, oh, well, that completely spoiled something. It's a case of, oh, that's intriguing. I'm not quite sure what she means by that, but I'm curious to see how and where we come to that point. Plus, and they do, on this podcast, they do make a point of talking a lot about the actors' other stuff anyway. How did you get into acting and stuff? And the Star Trek conversation is usually quite a small part of it because obviously most of the actors have been working for a very long time and done lots of stuff since whatever the show is they were on. Because especially if they're from the old original, the Berman era, as they call it, then obviously that was quite some time ago. And they've done a whole lot of stuff since. So
probably.
But yeah, Nana's
to a
great.
point where you've fed up with telling the same old stories at conventions and stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean that's
again anyway. So
like I mentioned earlier, the one about how she came up with the surname. So I want to share because I think it's such a funny story. Because when they asked her this, right, during this podcast, it's a podcast, but it's also on YouTube, so it's not only a podcast really. And I would recommend watching on YouTube because you get because like anything, if you can see the person speaking, you get a better sense of what they're really saying. If you can just hear them speaking, you can easily read into it.
Yes.
But you can see the physicality, you can see the truth of what they're saying, which is of course why we went to video on this because it just works so much better.
Nobody believed what we were saying.
No, well, they may have misconstrued what we said. Well, you didn't see his face. You could have been really serious. It's like, no, look at my face. I don't care. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, the story of how she got the name. It's a really funny story, but I would recommend watching the podcast to find out because she said that there's a story she tells people. She goes, well, this is the first time I've actually told it. She's like, well, obviously I've said it to people, but it's the first time I think I've said it on camera, the real story. Because she's got her convention story of it, I'm so tired of explaining it, so she's created a jokey kind of story of it. And she tells a real story. She goes, because the real story is so silly and so nobody will believe me. So I never really tell it. So I'm telling it once now, so that's way thousands can watch this and they'll know. And when I watched it and she told, I was like, actually, I think that's quite funny, actually. Really funny. But yeah, so Nana appreciation post over. Back to the episode.
Progress.
I'm going to have to tag her in this one when we share on Twitter.
You might have to.
Hopefully she might actually watch it. Because that'd be great. Well, if she watches it, she'll share it and then we can get lots of fans. And Nana, if you are watching this, on the off chance, you're amazing. And I'll share the photo of us from 2014 again because I love that photo. It's so long ago. I forgot how long ago it was until I found it recently. It's like, oh my god, that's 9 years ago. I had a lot of darker hair then as well.
Yeah.
I did notice that in the picture. I'm like, wow, that grade's come along a lot in the last 9 years. See, as you'll notice, gentle viewer, our podcast, our YouTube, it's not a vlog either, really, is it? It's our video reviews. Yeah. I think as we do more of them, and the more viewers we get and whatnot, I think we're going to have lots more...
grey hairs.
More what?
Grey hairs.
Grey hair? Well, yeah, that too. Unfortunately, yeah, unless we all start dyeing it all, which could be a thing, but I kind of like the white. It's darker this side, but as you can see, it's a lot greyer that side and that side. It's a thing. But what I was going to say is we'll go on tangents a lot.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of fun because it gives people watching a chance to know us properly as opposed to, well, as properly as you can from a computer screen.
Indeed, yes.
But, yeah, they'll see a hopefully slightly funner side of it. Funner. I know good English. I read it in the book.
Which of us is funnest?
Well, as we say in Wales, I was taught good England when I was a children.
God's sake. Oh, flipping it.
Wales have got some very fun sayings. But yeah, so progress.
Yeah, progress. I was just about to say, can I ask about the title? Are we looking at on that as an ironic title?
Well, I'm assuming the title is referring to the fact they're obviously doing this thing with the planet, with the moon.
Yeah.
And this guy, which obviously means, because isn't it going to be like an energy project where they're basically going to drill down to get more energy to help Bajor? Yeah, I believe that's what they were. And obviously Mullibok was standing in the way.
Inferno from 1970.
But hopefully without the actual primals and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
More of those whatnots. Whatever they are. I think, yeah, and of course Mullibok was very much standing in the way of that progress. Yeah. So I think that's the whole point of that. But you could certainly look at it like any title. There's good titles have many, many meanings, and I think you could charitably give it to Jake and Nog where they're progressing as characters, certainly. And of course the progression of just buying this Yamak sauce, or not buying, having the Yamak sauce, and the progression of them trying to find a way to get the frickin' Latinum. Yeah. And they're literally progressively trading for something more important and bigger and
self-sealing
stem bolts. Which apparently the writer says he has absolutely no idea what they are. It's a cool name. Doesn't know what they do, apart from apparently they self-steal stems, I guess. I don't know. Apparently it becomes an ongoing gag where they get mentioned a few times in later episodes throughout the run, like right till near the end, apparently. Actually, no. In the very last episode, O'Brien mentions them. And apparently that's a deliberate nod to the writer, Peter Allen Fields, who's a producer at this point, who obviously, like most, leaves and moves on to a new project. So they kept referring to the stem bolts as a nod to him, which is quite cool. And even Discovery, season 3, I believe,
really?
Which was only a couple of years ago now, they jumped forward to the 32nd century, so as far as Star Trek's ever gone, narratively speaking, ongoing. Yeah. And stem bolts are mentioned as a very out-of-dated thing now. So I remember when I actually watched the episode, I mentioned, I did chuckle. I'm like, hey, stem bolts, self-sealing, nice. it's a DS9 thing. If you're not a DS9 fan, you're never going to get that. But obviously, anybody watching this presumably are. Hopefully, if they're not already, are becoming DS9 fans because DS9 is cool. Oh, did you know, by the way? See, we're on tangents today. Now that we've subscribed to this channel, I don't feel so constrained.
I'm sorry to learn that you were feeling constrained before.
Well, constrained in the sense that I didn't want us to go over half an hour because I knew we only had 2 hours of
Right.
full
Time-wise,
recording time before I had
yes.
to pay for it.
Yeah,
And now I
yeah,
paid for it. I'm like, well, we've got 5 hours a month, and unless we literally talk an hour and 15 minutes every single week, we're okay.
He's paid for it.
Yes. And
Anyway,
we haven't got a mic
so
off yet, so when we do have one, it'll all help. But we'll do all that crap at the end.
now you've thrown off your constraints.
Yes. I don't. What was I saying?
I don't know.
What was I going to
Talking about
say?
self-sealing
Stem bolts.
There was another
Yeah,
tangent you were going to go on.
I was. I completely forgot what it was going to be.
Oh no, I do apologise. I've derailed your tangent
Yeah,
by
that's
being
fine.
with facetious comments.
Facetiousness will always derail me, but that's okay. But anyway, so yeah, progress. So we now know what the
Progress.
title means.
Yeah.
I
True.
think. I mean, let's wrap this up because we've gone over 10 minutes over our normal run time. So
Yeah, people will get bored by now.
exactly. We'll keep it light and fun as much as we can, because as you will find out, there's a lot more heavier stuff coming up on this series. So we get the lighting where we can. But yeah, I think let's bottom line it then. What's your bottom line takeaway for this particular episode?
I would say the easiest episode I've watched so far, but that's not to say that's not in a negative way. It's just it was an episode I was very, very comfortable with, and it just picked me up and took me along with it right from the start. So yeah, I'd say ease and comfort is my bottom line for this episode as a viewer.
Well,
As a
for
first-time
me,
viewer.
that's a first timer.
That's
For
first
me,
time.
as a long timer, is that the right phrase?
Not
A
for this kind of
repeated
podcast.
offender. Um, um, I would say it still holds up for me after watching it many times now over years. Because after I watched these when they first came on VHS over here, because that's how we had to watch them back then. So we would got them about a year later, maybe. So we're talking 94, I guess. That's 29 years ago. That's scary, isn't it? I was obviously only a baby then.
Just a
He says with the grey hair. I still think it holds up really well. I would say it's easily the strongest episode we've had this season so far. We've only got 5 to go. So can it be topped? Yes, it can. But you may not agree. Actually, no, trust me. I guarantee right now the penultimate episode is going to be your favourite this season.
right.
I would lay money on it, but we don't have. Well, Bitcoin.
have
I lay
that kind of
Bitcoins on it. I'm very
Oh,
up with the tech.
Thanks. I prefer
Yeah,
gold pressed platinum.
which is because you see, gold, of course, is I think they mentioned. I think they finally mentioned at some point, but gold, of course, is a crap metal anyway, as we know. It's very weak.
It's soft metal, yeah.
Yeah. And obviously their com badges have gold in them, so gold is no big whoop for the. But it's a latinum, which is very, which is what's inside the bars and the strips and whatnot. It's very valuable liquid stuff inside. So the latinum is actually the stuff inside. That's the valuable stuff that they trade.
Right.
Which I do wonder then if you're trading all this latinum, which is the liquid inside, what can it be? I'm assuming it can be used for something other than it being so presumably rare and valuable. I don't know. I don't think they ever really go into it, but I think we do finally one day learn that that's what it is, not the gold itself. But anyway, yeah. So my bottom line is absolutely, I think this is the best so far this season. So far, but
So far.
we got 5 to go.
Right.
Speaking of, because we should be doing this whole, let's tell people our links and stuff at the end of each episode, because
Yes.
we haven't done that for a while. The next episode is called If Wishes Were Horses.
Wow. Okay.
Thoughts?
Uh,
What do you reckons?
no, it's it's presumably part of some old, like whatever they're called, like idiom or saying. It sounds it's like one of those old sayings. So
If wishes were horses, they'd run away. I don't know. If wishes were horses, you could give them a carrot. I'm assuming there's more to it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't. It's not like an old saying that I'm familiar with. It sounds.
Tell you what,
like
let's
it's
find
part
out,
of an
shall
old
we?
thing.
Let's just find out before we move on to the old talk about.
Wishes were horses.
You links. If wishes were horses. If it comes up with a DS9 episode, I'm going to be very annoyed. No, I don't see how that fits at all. Apparently, the proverb,
That's a proverb.
first recorded in 1628 from Scotland, apparently. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. I think something with a slightly lazy arse. Having a W's and R's next to each other, not smart. So yeah, apparently that's the common version is if wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. If turnips were swords, I'd have one at my side. If ifs and ands were pots and pans, there'd be no work for tinker's hands.
Ooh, the ifs and ands is familiar. That's
So
the
there
most
we
familiar
go.
Part of that. So, okay.
Yeah, now that I've actually got the full verse, yes, I can see how it fits.
Right.
It makes more sense to me now.
Okay. Well, I'll take that as a little personal win of acknowledging that it was part of some proverb, even though it wasn't one I was
No,
familiar with. But,
I never knew the full version.
the 17th century Scotland
Yeah.
is not one of my strengths. So
No, it's slightly before our time.
indeed.
Even
So-
for me, it's slightly before my time. Being the elder statesman. Right, so yes, anyway, once again, thank you all for watching. We'll be back, I'm going to say next week, because we seem to be on a roll here. So,
Let's hope
tempt
so.
fate. So yes, next week will be Wishes with Horses. I'll say usual time, but there's no usual time. There's usual time for us, but not for when this goes up, because when you upload in 4K, it takes a lot longer. But worth it, because it's much better to sound and, usual nonsense. Anyway,
Pause.
in the meantime, we would be interested in listening to your comments or reading your comments about this episode, so please do pop in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to us, because apparently that's how we get better. The more you subscribe, the more people will be aware of us, because then it starts to appear on people's suggestions. This is how these things work, apparently.
Right, okay.
See, we're so new to this shit. Yeah. I think soon we'll set up one of those My Coffee accounts, so that if you so wish, you could help fund us. And as I say, anything you do pay in when we set one up will go into the podcast in some way or another. Podcast? Is it really a podcast? I suppose it is.
It's as good a word
What's
as any.
podcast mean? Pod. We'll look at that one up next week. Unless you know, then we could tell us below. Yes, and in the meantime, follow us on Twitter, which is at Replimat1, I believe. I think that's right. You just checking.
Check in.
Hopefully it won't take you as long to find it.
Flipping, come on. Wait. Yes, at Replimat 1.
One
capital
as in the
R.
digit.
And 1 as in the number. Yes.
Yeah, the numeral. You can find me on there as well. Where it's at Vinjor_Dan. That's VINGOGJOR. We're doing good here. _DAN. And you can find Tim on there as
at Mr_Brell, BRELL.
Hey, there we go.
Hey.
Yes, so we'll be back hopefully next week. Either way, next time, but next week hopefully, to talk about if wishes were horses, then beggars would die, or something, or ride, not die, ride.
Yeah.
This is a good one. I think this is our best one we've done yet.
I reckon so.
So a more relaxed one we've done.
Apologies to any beggars out there who may have
Yeah, who want to ride but will die instead. We do apologise. We don't want to kill you, honest.
Keep wishing. Keep wishing.
Keep wishing. Yeah. You know, you might get a horse.
Yes.
Or something. Okay, cool. All right then, people.
Right.
We shall see you next week. So goodbye from me and goodbye from
me.
Until then, toodle pip.